Secretary Yi, in your testimony, you mentioned corruption. When Senator Murphy and I went through Poland, Ukraine, then to Romania and Bulgaria, certainly that was echoed as a reality situation. A legacy of really the Soviet era is just corruption throughout those Eastern European nations. When we visited Poland, I think our sense was of the countries we visited, they've probably made the most progress in terms of limiting corruption, and I think they're probably doing better economically as a result of that. I want to talk a little bit about Romania because I think we were both impressed with the Charlie Butler there, or Butcher. And he arranged a meeting initially with us. Our first meeting in Romania was with the Chief Prosecutor General for Corruption, Laura Kövesi, I believe I'm pronouncing her name right. Incredibly impressive, incredibly courageous young woman who is really battling corruption in Romania. I think we were both concerned that we don't have an ambassador for Romania. The Chargé's term was basically coming up. Is the administration at all addressing that situation? Because I think the only way Romania proceeds in terms of reducing corruption is to have a strong U.S. presence, continue to put pressure on the Romanian government to certainly protect Ms. Kövesi, who is under death threat. But can you just speak at all in terms of the administration's plan in terms of American representation to Romania?
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Yes, the administration is working to identify an ambassador for Romania, working as quickly as possible to identify the right candidate. We also agree with you, Senator Johnson, that Dwayne Butcher, our Chargé d'Affaires there, is doing an excellent job. We do agree that there needs to be an ambassador, and we're working to get that in place as soon as possible. Regarding the prosecutor you mentioned, Ms. Kövesi, and the overall effort to fight corruption in Romania, American leadership has been critical. I think our good relations, working relations with the government, even when we disagree with the government, Mr. Ponta, is such that we're able to express our concerns, our objections, when there are steps taken by officials, business people that are clearly in violation of Romanian law, in addition to international rules and principles. So we have that frank dialogue. We're able to do that with a very strong embassy team there. I think we need to continue to do that. It certainly helps when members of Congress also visit these capitals to reinforce the message that we take corruption very seriously, not only as a matter of economics or of moral principle, but as a matter of national security.
Until an ambassador is appointed, has the administration considered reappointing or asking Mr. Butcher to stay on?
Mr. Butcher will complete his tenure this summer. There is another Chargé d'Affaires who has already arrived at post and is overlapping now with Mr. Butcher, who will take over by the end of the summer. Okay.
Again, I'm sure Senator Murphy agrees with me. We do not want to see a void there in Romania. It'd be important that we don't do that. Mr. Hochstein, you were talking a little bit about developing shale gas in Europe. Do you have, or does the U.S. have any estimates, or does Europe have any estimates in terms of what their oil and gas potential really is if they were willing to exploit it?
Yes, Senator, we work with countries that are interested. And as Chairman Murphy talked about when he used the example of Germany, it's a country by country. Every member state in the EU has a very different perspective on different resources, including shale. We had worked very closely with Poland, with Ukraine, with Romania, and we're working with other countries that are interested in pursuing that. We help identify what the shale resource is using their own resources and the U.S. Geological Survey to be able to conduct a survey to identify what the levels and what the commerciality is of those resources.
So can you share with me or the committee what those resources are? I mean, what are the estimates? Can Europe be more independent if it were only to, for example, do fracking, actually exploit their shale gas reserves?
So again, there's always a difference between what the estimates are and what it becomes in reality. If you look at Poland as an example, there were a lot of published estimates that were quite high. Several companies, international oil companies, including large American companies, went in. The results were were more disappointing. Some have already left as a result. Some have remained. So we have to see as the drilling begins, and we'll see what's happening. In Ukraine, we are working with them on putting some of those frameworks in place to allow further exploration. They are interested. There are already companies in place. Romania is the same, where you visited. I was there just before the Senate delegation was there with Vice President Biden, talking to them about pursuing their unconventional resources as well as their offshore resources. So in short, I don't have the figures in front of me. It's something that I can definitely send to your office for you to see what our estimates are. In some places we don't deliver those publicly. But we are working with any country that's interested in doing it. And we have a program at the State Department, the Unconventional Gas Technical Expertise Program, that specifically puts together that framework for countries interested.
You know, to the best of your knowledge, the companies that went in but have subsequently left, did they leave because the oil and gas reserves weren't there, too expensive to develop, or did they leave because of corruption, or some combination of the two?
In that case, it was not the issue of corruption. It was more about the resource.
Okay. Can you just speak to me a little bit about spot pricing versus oil index pricing and the effect that has on the situation in Europe in terms of gas?
Europe buys its gas by pipeline from some of their suppliers, and they can buy LNG. They can bring it in as liquefied natural gas through other ports. They have long-term contracts, and then there are spot prices. The long-term contracts that they have with Russia, for instance, have been renegotiated a couple of years ago. Some of them are coming up for renewal. The price in Europe has traditionally been relatively high. It's come down over the last couple of years. Part of that is because of the shale gas revolution in the United States, other market dynamics around the world. Prices have settled now on somewhere in the $10 to $12. But it's also because there's been fuel switching in Europe as well. There's been a lot of switchover from gas to coal. And with a mild winter in a region that uses gas primarily for heating, that reduces the need for gas as well. So a variety of factors come into the pricing. I wouldn't want to suggest that there's one specific cause for pricing, but clearly if they can improve their infrastructure interconnection. So it's not just about creating the infrastructure to bring the gas into the continent, but rather for it to flow across from country to country. If you can upgrade the infrastructure in Romania so there could be a flow cross-border, if you can bring interconnections from Croatia into Hungary, from Slovakia into Hungary, if all those interconnections can happen, you can have an integrated market where gas can flow. That will help with price, and it will help with stability and security.
And I know I'm out of time, but just let me follow up on this. Would moving towards spot pricing, would that be a net positive or net negative for Europe?
You know, that's probably a good question to ask some of my colleagues and friends who are going to testify in the second panel. I wouldn't want to speculate on that. I think that I've learned in this job that speculating on price in oil and gas is dangerous.
Are you seeing a trend one way or the other in Europe, a movement towards spot away from oil indexed?
You know, I think it depends on when you ask the question. If you asked me that last year, I probably would have had a different answer about what the trajectory is versus now. I think that the events and how we see events happening in the next few months shaping up, you probably will see a change. But again, I would reserve that for those who are going to speculate.
Okay.
Questions for this panel?
It might be hypocritical. I just want to go to nuclear. My understanding is France generates about 75% of its power needs through nuclear power. Is that largely correct? What is the activity throughout the rest of Europe in terms of developing nuclear as a clean energy alternative?
Again, changes from country to country. There are a number of countries that are working on nuclear energy. Hungary is looking to expand its current nuclear. The Czech Republic has been in a very lengthy process to identify, through the tender process, to identify a company to build and expand nuclear power. That's hit some stumbling blocks in the Czech Republic. Bulgaria is working on it as well. So there are countries that are working on expanding and promoting nuclear energy. There are others, as Chairman Murphy mentioned, like Germany, that have decided in the wake of the Fukushima disaster to go the other direction. When we're asked for our opinion in Europe, we clearly say that this is something for each state and each country to make their own decisions. We believe that nuclear energy should be part of the mix. But that's something for a sovereign state to make their own decision. If they so choose to go in the nuclear direction and make that part of their mix, we will be there fully supportive and work with. We believe that we have companies here in the United States that are the best in the world, and we believe that it's probably going to be a good decision for energy security for each country to have as many clean energy options as possible.
What does Europe do with its nuclear waste?
I don't have that information in front of me, but again, I'm happy to get that to you, sir.
You were mentioning the impact on price, just U.S. importing less oil and gas. Can you give us put some figures to that trend?
We today are not yet a net, we're not a net exporter yet of natural gas. We will be, I believe it's by 2016, we'll be a net exporter of natural gas. We today still import some gas. And on the oil side, we are far from being independent, as people like to say. We still import significant amounts of oil. However, we have reduced our imports quite significantly down to the 30% range. And that has a lot of our gas we get still from our hemisphere and from our region, with some quantities coming from Saudi and elsewhere. So we're in a much better position. I cringe sometimes when people talk about energy independence in the United States. I think that self-sufficiency is something that we can strive for. Independence would suggest that we are immune to the market. And a disruption anywhere in the world, and with everything that's going on geopolitically in the world today in energy-producing countries, would have a great impact everywhere around the world, including here. If you look at the crisis in Iraq and what happened in the days after when the prices spiked around the world, they spiked here in a commensurate way. So even though our production has increased, we're still susceptible to the market, which still calls for our direct, active leadership and engagement in the world, in the oil markets, and engaging diplomatically with countries that are producing hydrocarbons.
Okay, well, I appreciate that answer, but what I was really looking for was what happened to the price in Europe when we ended up importing less oil and gas. I mean, I actually want some numbers. I'm not an oil and gas expert, so I just want to understand, what the movement was.
Causality is always difficult to address directly, but when the extra volumes from the United States came on the market, prices at around the same time came down from in the $14, $15 range in Europe down to the 10 to 12. Recently even dipped a little bit lower than that in Europe range for natural gas. So that's where you can see the price differential.
And current price, and so current price is about 10?
In Europe, it's in that range again.
And in the U.S., it's?
In the U.S. today, it's natural gas, $4.30 around today.
I've heard arguments on both sides that if we actually would export more, that would lead toward greater exploration. We'd actually build pipelines to capture some of the gas we're just flaring, just wasting. What is your administration's viewpoint in terms of if we actually did increase more exports, what would actually happen to the price of gas?
Well, as far as the administration is concerned, the Department of Energy has approved a fairly large amount of natural gas for export. So I think that tells you what we think about that. There's been some studies.
It really doesn't.
No, I think that we looked at the Department of Energy Commission studies and did its own studies on the economic impacts of exports and determined that it would not have, the exports that it's already approved would not have an economic adverse effect on the U.S. price. It could go up some, but it would not have a terribly adverse effect. So
you'd basically be disagreeing with what Senator Markey talks about in terms of dramatically increasing price of gas if we were to export more?
I think if we believe that there would be a dramatic increase in price, then we may be more cautious in having approved what we've approved so far in the licenses. But that is why every license that comes that is submitted for approval is looked at through that lens of what would be first of all, the impact on the United States. So far, the quantities which are large that we have approved, we have not determined would have a detrimental effect.
In terms of the effect it might have on Vladimir Putin's calculation, even though it wouldn't come on stream immediately, I come from the business world where I really do believe that the customer is king. I mean, customers ought to be more in control of what the pricing levels are versus the supplier, but we haven't we haven't developed the structure, we haven't had the competitive environment to cause that. Do you believe that just that signal alone would change or help to change Vladimir Putin's calculation in terms of his long-term control over that marketplace?
I believe that Russia and others around the world already have internalized the effects of what the shale gas boom here in the United States has done, and that we no longer import the levels that we have. We're going to be a net exporter. I think they've already understood that, and that factors in. I think it's had a very important effect.
Mr. Yi, let me just ask you, I'm calling it Putin's pause. I've actually been appreciate the fact that he's not sent, overtly more support, and looks like Ukraine is having some success at stabilizing the region, certainly getting, stabilizing some of those cities. Do you have any explanation for that? Do you know what he's thinking?
I think it'd be very risky to try to get inside Vladimir Putin's brain and to explain what he's thinking.
Let me just ask, does that surprise the State Department?
That he's paused.
Yeah.
I think I would say that it's not a complete surprise that in light of some resolve on the part of the international community in standing up to what Russia and Russian proxies are doing in Ukraine, in addition to some bold military action, security action by the Ukrainian government and security forces, it should not be a great surprise if we're talking about the recent days. Since March, I think there's been a cumulative effect with measures led by the United States and NATO in showing that we are absolutely committed, first and foremost, to our Article 5 commitments under the NATO treaty, in putting additional forces in the frontline states near Ukraine, in applying limited sanctions against Russians and Ukrainians who are undermining Ukrainian sovereignty. I think it is reasonable, and it's actually predictable that there would be some pause on.
But what has this administration specifically done to help Ukraine militarily, as they're trying to grapple with their security situation?
Well, we have, as you know, Senator, a large package of assistance that we've provided to Ukraine, both in terms of assistance to the government in the immediate needs for shelter, vehicles, emergency equipment. We've provided non-lethal assistance to the military.
And what does that mean? I mean, specifically, what types of equipment have we provided?
We're talking about cars, vehicles, basic equipment, non-lethal equipment the military needs in order to perform basic functions. It is non-lethal. It's a type of equipment we feel comfortable at this point providing, and it's what the Ukrainian forces have requested from us. I'm not saying that it is all that is going to be necessary. We're not in any way predicting this is the end. This pause is somehow the beginning of the end. I think we have to be prepared for a longer effort and continued resolve on the part of not only the United States but its allies. But we have provided assistance, a large amount of assistance, both in terms of the humanitarian assistance to the people of Ukraine, and also assistance in terms of efforts by NATO and its U.S. and its NATO allies in putting troops on the ground, putting additional planes in the area, in the frontline states, as well as a naval presence on the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea to show that we are determined.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions for the second round? Senator Johnson?
Mr. Ambassador, you asked for a softball, so I'll throw it to you. So what is Putin thinking?
I think what Putin is thinking right now is that, first of all, he says, my goal was to destabilize the Ukraine enough so that it is definite that the Ukraine will not be part of the Western institutions, the European Union or NATO. This was his first goal. I think he's achieved that, and he is going to resort to all kind of means to stoke trouble when the moment comes and it looks like that things are kind of too smooth. I think for now, he's totally satisfied with running or owning, quote unquote, the Crimea, and I have no doubt that, of course, at any moment he can turn the switch on, and we will be back to a lot of trouble. The fact that we don't see him visibly present in the Eastern Ukrainian conflict at this moment does not mean that he is not fully in control of the insurgencies.
Mr. Lucas?
Yeah, I think Mr. Putin thinks that we're weak and he's winning.
I agree. I was always in support of strong sanctions, hopefully targeted ones that were really painful to Putin, not to us. When we were talking about all these sanctions that they were a double-edged sword, I really wanted to stop talking about them because I thought it was just a delaying action. They weren't going to be implemented, and they had no effect. When we were in Poland, I don't want to identify the individual telling us this, but I think we've had this since confirmed. Apparently 100 to 110 Russians control 35% of the wealth. Certainly, being from the outside in, hearing how effective the sanctions were against North Koreans, just top leaders, denying them their access to their banking accounts and traveling to Macau and that type of thing, was the most effective sanction. Why don't we target in a far more robust fashion those 100 to 110 individuals in Russia? They really do rely on the West for their banking, for their wealth, dispersion, that type of thing. Mr. Lucas, I'll go to you.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, Senator, and I think that we're looking for kind of magic sanctions that don't hurt us and do hurt Putin. And unfortunately, there aren't such things, and every country's got something to lose because Russia's done a very good job of building up vulnerabilities and dependencies. But I do think these visa sanctions and asset freezes are a really powerful weapon. We haven't begun to exploit them. We have laws against money laundering in this country, and in my country, in your country. Banks are supposed to know their customer before they start taking deposits. So how is it possible these people on their modest official salaries and their sons and daughters and wives and parents and all the rest of it are coming and putting tens and hundreds of millions of dollars through our payment system and through our financial system? How is it possible that Rosneft was allowed to list on the London Stock Exchange when Rosneft feasted on the corpse of Yukos? You remember, Russia's biggest oil company dismembered because of a political fight with the Kremlin. Rosneft buys its assets for nothing. $8 billion of Western shareholders' money goes down the tube. And then this company, which is effectively taking stolen property, is allowed to list on one of the oldest, most reputable stock exchanges. How's that possible? The old Russian dissidents had a great slogan, which was, powers that be, enforce your laws. Vlast soblюдайте законы. And I think we should just start by enforcing our own laws. And we'd be amazed at the scope. And on visas, we don't have to just stop with these people. The most terrifying thing in Russia is not the secret police. It's an angry Russian woman. And if these people are going home at night and finding that their wives and grandmothers and daughters are all saying, we can't study in the West anymore, we can't shop in the West anymore, we can't go vacation in the West anymore because of these visa sanctions applying to us, that would really hurt.
Doesn't it also threaten the oligarchs when they can't spread their money around the world? I mean, I wouldn't want to be an oligarch in Russia, fall in favor of Putin, have all my wealth in Russia.
The first thing they do is they get foreign passports. They get Finnish citizenship and Swiss citizenship. They move their assets offshore. They diversify because they realize what a mess Russia's in. We have a wonderful opportunity there to hurt them.
Mr. Ambassador, you want to chime in?
Just want to ask, yes, we know there is much more grumbling in the inner circles of Putin about the sanctions than meets the eye. So I do...
So let me ask, why don't we do it?
That I don't know, and I think Putin thinks that he can count on the divide between
So again,
U.S. and Europe.
we're showing more weakness playing right into his hands.
I think so.
Mr. Lucas, what is the EU thinking by not dropping those charges on Gazprom, not revealing to the public what they found in their investigations? What is the EU thinking? Because what would be a more perfect, totally directed sanction to a certain extent when Putin is invading Crimea and threatening eastern Ukraine? What could be more effective than that? What are they thinking?
I think in a way it was too perfect, that it was seen as an enormous escalation of a response when both the conventional wisdom, which I believe is wrong in both this country and in Europe, was we need to find an exit ramp for Putin. We don't want to escalate this. We're not going to send massive naval task forces to the Black Sea. We are trying to apply very judicious, moderate sanctions, raise the cost of Putin, and give him a chance to back down. And launching this equivalent of a kind of cruise missile straight at the Kremlin wasn't seen as part of that. I think that was wrong. I think that postponing it makes him think the Russians have always hoped that there would be a political solution to this, and they've said again and again to the European Union, don't go down this quasi-prosecutorial, quasi-judicial role. Let's have a political deal. We'll agree to stop doing some stuff and maybe pay a little bit of fines here and there, but we don't want a big public fight. And I fear that argument has begun to bite, and I think it's a great pity. It would have been a wonderful thing to see this prosecution of Gazprom, and I'm beginning to wonder if we're ever going to see it. Certainly, it was hoped that it was going to be under this commission, but it looks to me at the moment as though it's going to be passed to the next commission, and we don't, of course, know what the political complexion and makeup of that commission will be.
Okay, thank you. I'll complete my next round.
Johnson.
I want to go back to the issue of winning, because I think it's just the crucial point. If we don't understand what the objective of our adversaries are, we'll misjudge. So I don't believe Putin's acting rationally from a standpoint of improving his economy. I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. This is not long-term in Russia's best interest, but is it in the best interest of Vladimir Putin? I think this is all about Vladimir Putin, about his ego, about his power, about his control. Mr. Lucas, you, in your testimony, you were talking about when we expanded NATO, we did not even draw up contingency plans for the military defense of the new members because we assumed Russia was a friend. Now, we all hoped that. I wish at this point Russia was a friendly rival, but they're not a friendly rival. They're an adversary. I'm hoping they don't become a full-fledged enemy. So, Mr. Lucas, I want to ask you again, what do you think is Vladimir Putin's goal? Personally, what is he in this for?
Well, I think, first of all, lots of money, to be honest. And secondly, I think he wants to weaken the West to the point that he doesn't think we're a threat to him. So he wants to corrupt, corrode, and coerce Europe. And he's doing a pretty good job of it. I think he worries that successful countries on his borders might give his people ideas. We, I think quite wrongly, in the European Union, thought that Russia would be happy if we could make Ukraine into a success story. We thought it would be nice for Russia to have a large, successful, prosperous, well-governed, law-abiding neighbor with a free press and contested elections and so on, and this would be a great thing for Russia. And I tried again and again to explain to European Union officials that if we try to make a success of Ukraine, that is an existential threat to Putin, and he will react very strongly. And they said, we don't believe in geopolitics. And I said, you may not believe in geopolitics, but geopolitics believes in you. And
but explain a little bit further why that's an existential threat to Putin. If Putin has got successful democracies that are Western-leaning, lacking corruption or reduced corruption, and his citizens are seeing that in Ukraine, is that the reason it's an existential threat?
Yes. Well, because, for example, if you have, Ukraine would be the second largest Russian media space in the world, and if you have tens of millions of people consuming Russian media and fostering a lively culture of debate and inquiry, some of those debates and inquiries will start touching on Russia, and Russians will start watching that. And he needs to be able to tell Russians that my way is the only way, and nothing else works.
So successful bordering countries threaten his power, threaten his control. So this is true. When I first made my trip to the region in 2011, every last one of those countries was talking about, and this is short, we went up to the border in Georgia where they had invaded. They were all talking about how Vladimir Putin at that point in time was doing everything he possibly could to undermine their success, undermine their democracies.
Absolutely, Senator. I think you've put your finger on a very important point, which is that these frontline states have been warning us in the West about this for even before Putin, for 25 years.
And we just refuse to acknowledge it because
absolutely.
It doesn't make sense to us.
Yeah.
You know, why would anybody do that? You know, we all want integrated economies. We want it to lift up everybody's lifestyle. That's not what Putin's trying to do.
We absolutely patronised them, we belittled them, we ignored them, we told them they had their hair on fire, and they've been proved right. And I think the first thing we should do, we should ask them for advice. We should say, what do you think we should be doing? You actually know this problem better than we do. What's your suggestion?
What a concept. Go to
Over
real
to
experts.
Hungarian.
Okay, Mr.
Well,
Ambassador.
I can't resist to cut in here because I agree. We did warn our friends and allies about the impending dangers of Putin, and this has been in the making for the last 12 or more years. So as far as I'm concerned, I keep telling people, just because I'm a Hungarian, I might still be right about Vladimir Putin. But I'd like to echo what Edward said is that, well, long term. First of all, he is not interested in the long-term success of Russia, because what you're talking about is a very difficult, painful, bloody process, at the end of the day, which will be the best for the Russian people. What he's interested in is the next 20 years. He wants to stay in power for the next 20 years. And we are the biggest threat for his continuous remaining in power, because transparency, because accountability, because the rule of law means that he will end up where almost all authoritarian leaders or dictators end up. And that is something he wants to prevent.
So understanding his goal, and I totally agree with that. This is all about one man's power for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
What's the best way to blunt that? What's the best way to confront that? What is the first thing we should do, the most effective thing, the thing that we can do and implement quickly?
Okay, well, let me just say that, and I've still got the light on. So let me just say this, that it's counterintuitive. The harder we react, the stronger our reaction, the more determined we are, the more likely he is to back off.
But by the way, when we were in Poland, again, I don't want to name the official, he said, this individual said that the main reason Vladimir Putin didn't go further into eastern Ukraine is because he was genuinely surprised at the West's reaction. We had bipartisan senatorial delegations. The West actually covered what he was doing, and basically this Polish official credited the West's reaction that surprised Putin for having him hold off. So that basically bolsters your point.
Yes, but I would add that it could have been a little harder. And that would have.
Absolutely.
And Senator, I just say this because that would have given us a lot more time to fix the problem.
I think our reaction has been totally weak, totally lacked resolve, totally inadequate. Go ahead, Mr. Chow.
First of all, I want to agree with my fellow panelists that Mr. Putin clearly has different metrics for success than we hold. But I also want to say that he's not insensitive to the downsides of what his action has caused. I see the deal that he signed with the Chinese in Shanghai on May 21st, for example, as a reaction. It's not going to help him in the short run, but as a reaction to the need to show that Russia cannot be isolated, and his need for a political win in the foreign policy and trade sphere. So the fact that he may think that he's winning does not mean that we should give up. I think the steadfastness of Western policy is the most important thing. And here I will repeat again what I said in my oral testimony earlier, that strengthening Ukraine, helping Ukraine become a democratic and prosperous free market country is the best thing that we could be doing in the short to medium term.
I totally agree. And by the way, I think what we should be doing is doing everything we can to bolster President Poroshenko's hand, help provide advisors, provide military equipment if so requested, and I mean real military equipment, things that actually might change the balance, change the calculus. Ms. Schaefer.
I think we shouldn't equate Russia's recent actions just with Putin's personalities and his specific goals. But I think actually any Russian leadership would try to invade Crimea. After the invasion of Crimea, there was an interesting debate in the United States. Is this the return of geopolitics? To my ears as an international relations specialist, the idea of return of geopolitics is like saying, oh, the return of the Pacific Ocean or the return of the Caucasus Mountains. Of course, geopolitics is always there, and the only thing that changed is that we tried, as Mr. Lucas pointed out, we tried to ignore ignore them. And E.H. Carr, who I think is the most important strategist of the 20th century, said that the most dangerous way of analyzing politics is the world as you would like it to be versus as it is. The Crimea, the Soviet breakup left Crimea, left the Black Sea Fleet outside the jurisdiction of Russia. I'm not saying on an ethical level this was nice to invade another country, but this was almost like leaving the Pacific Fleet outside. If California broke off from the United States and leaving the Pacific Fleet outside the jurisdiction of the United States. It was a ticking bomb. And the only problem, as some of our panelists have pointed out, we didn't learn any lessons about how countries react. Actually, there is something connecting these panels in terms of natural gas, because states are like natural gas. They expand as much as they can until they hit some kind of container. And basically, Russia saw this as the opportunity, this was the timing, but invading Crimea was something that was always going to happen. We've seen it, this is the Russian playbook. I think that why they seem to be pulling back from Ukraine is that it gets us to eastern Ukraine. We're focusing on eastern Ukraine and forgetting about Crimea. This is the same thing they did when they invaded Georgia. Seems like they're going to invade Tbilisi when they have no intent to invade it. Then you're very happy when they stay just in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. It seems like they're going to invade, Azerbaijan, and then you see, they're very happy when they just want to stay in the region as peacekeepers. So I think this is their playbook, is to get us focusing on getting them out of eastern Ukraine, so we won't really remember that they actually are staying in Crimea.
Now, Vladimir Putin is playing the West like a violin because we refuse to acknowledge reality. We continue to deny reality, try and rely on hope as being a strategy, and hope isn't. We have to be very brutal in our assessment of what the reality situation is, and that's why I keep going back to having to recognize what Vladimir Putin's goal really is his power, his control, and that's why I do personalize it more, because it makes no sense for his country, for the citizens of Russia. It makes total sense when he wants to maintain his own personal power for as long as he lives.
But just to respond to Senator Murphy's question about who's winning, I think every day thousands of people are trying to enter the United States, and they hope not only to enter here but to stay here as legal citizens. I don't see thousands of people trying to break through the border and make it into Russia. So I think in the end of the day we can feel very comfortable. I agree, we have to stop this defeatism in our policies.